Breaking news, the Cincinnati Bengals are officially signing a linebacker for the 2026 season. April Fools. Hey, how's it going? Stone Shields here with the Stone Shield Show. Unfortunately, the Bengals did not actually make a signing at that position. However, we do have some Bengals news that we need to discuss here on today's show. Paul Dehner Jr., friend of the show, does a fantastic job covering the Cincinnati Bengals for The Athletic. He has boots on the ground out in Phoenix, Arizona, NFL league meetings, owners meetings, and he sat down with some beat reporters locally and across the National Football League from a national perspective and gave about 40 minutes of his time over breakfast answering some questions. And Paul Dehner Jr. penned a piece yesterday morning, and we are going to discuss it here on today's show. Of note, obviously, I'm not in studio. This is a pre-recorded show. We will continue to have these throughout the duration of the week before we are back in studio next week, but obviously still wanted to bring content, podcasts, YouTube shows to the platform, even though we are not in office here this week. But we're going to talk Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to talk some takeaways from Zac Taylor and his meetings with the media that transpired yesterday morning. Also, got to talk about Dan Hurley as well. He, of course, is going back to the Final Four for UConn, third time in 4 years, has a couple of rings, back-to-back national titles, 23 and 24. Slight off year last year, I guess. They gave Florida, who eventually won the national title, everything they could handle in that tournament game last year, and now they're right back in the Final Four, and we got to talk about that a little bit because there is something that transpired at the end of that game with Duke that had me scratching my head. This day and age of artificial intelligence, I'm sitting there watching these clips that my buddies are sending me, and I'm going, this has got to be AI. Turns out it is not AI. And it was real, what was transpiring with Dan Hurley at the end of the game, right after Braylon Mullins hit that shot, the game-winning shot for UConn to ultimately punch their ticket back into the Final Four. We'll talk about that. We'll kind of stay on that game a little bit. We talked about Shire earlier in the week, but I saw this piece for The Athletic that kind of had my head spinning a little bit. I understand that that's several devastating defeats in the tournament consecutively for Jon Scheyer since he has taken over, but this notion that he doesn't know what he's doing or he's in over his skis or that they could be potentially in trouble as far as Duke and their basketball program and might need new leadership in place. Again, that wasn't pointed out exactly that way in The Athletic, but it seemed like it was kind of alluding to the fact that Scheyer might not be the right guy for the job. And I'm by no means a Duke fan, but my goodness, it took Coach K 10 plus years before he hung a banner. I think it took him 11 years as the head man at Duke before ultimately he hung a banner. Took Calipari a long time, as well as multiple different locations in order to hang one. Bill Self, Roy Williams, the greats in this sport in college basketball, they didn't just win titles overnight. And Scheyer now, I think this was his fourth or fifth year, hasn't been here very long, is still like 38 years old, not even 40 years of age yet, and has gone to multiple Elite Eights, Sweet 16s, and I understand, taking a look at that loss and going, man, that's a blown lead late, similar to what happened last year with Cooper Flagg, obviously, in the game against Houston. But, I mean, this dialogue that Scheyer might not be the right guy or doesn't know what he's doing is absolutely ridiculous. So we're going to touch on that on today's show. Also, we talked about Tiger earlier in the week. Came out with a statement yesterday basically saying he's going to step away. And this isn't the first time that we've seen him have to do this. He's been a part of, obviously, several different scandals. The first big one was, cheating on his wife with several different other women, and then he kind of checked himself into a rehab sort of situation after that and was gone for like 40-ish days. We'll see exactly how long he is going to be gone here at this point, but his first public remarks came out via a social media post. We'll talk a little bit about Tiger here on the show, and also, if we have time, LeBron James. It's funny. I've made this joke before on the show, whereas, it kind of gets to this point, February, March, people that do what I do, they don't want to fully go all in with NBA conversation yet. By the way, the season is dwindling down, and once the playoffs get here, we will go hardcore a little bit with the NBA. But I feel like people that do this are like, hey, you know what, I need a topic right now, so let's just talk about LeBron. And usually it's let's bash LeBron. That's not exactly what we're going to do here on this show, but if we have some time, we'll talk about his future beyond this year here in 26 and where things could look in 27 if ultimately he decides to play. I've been hard on the Lakers all throughout the year, but you look at the standings, they're the 3 seed, and I think it's pretty obvious that there's several rings on the ladder below teams like San Antonio and OKC in the West. But you're talking about Denver, you're talking about Minnesota, 2 teams that I think people nationally believe have a legitimate chance to potentially hoist the trophy at the end of the day. I mean, the Lakers have a leg up on them, certainly from a record perspective. And, if it's a 7-game series, Thunder, Lakers, who you taking? I'm probably taking, or excuse me, not the Thunder, Nuggets, Lakers, who you taking? Probably the Nuggets, right? But the Lakers have really put together a nice year under J.J. Redick. They deserve some credit for that, and they're really in a good spot here. 3 seed not exactly locked up here at this point, but the Lakers do have some life, and I'll be the first to admit I kind of had written them off as a team that really had no business competing in the conference finals. Ultimately, we'll see when the playoffs get underway, but they've had a really nice regular season here to this point, so we will discuss that if we have some time here on today's show. Also of note, the Reds are currently in action as I am recording this. Top of the 7th, they trail by a score of 6-1. I've listened to a little bit to Tommy and Cowboy on the radio. I've seen group chats exploding about the defensive issues. Certainly for O'Neal Cruz from a Pittsburgh perspective, the Reds struggling hitting-wise with runners in scoring position, but haven't really been geared into this game fully. We'll do an update at the end of this recording. Maybe the game will be over by that. Reds currently have some work to do in the 7th inning, down by 5 runs, but it's setting the table for a pretty entertaining Game 3 later today, which actually will, I believe it's 12:40 first pitch. So if you're watching this live from here on Chatterbox Sports YouTube, about 40 minutes before first pitch, and it's Paul Skeens and Andrew Abbott. And if you haven't been tapped into the Pittsburgh Pirates, or you're not necessarily tapped into Major League Baseball as a whole, Paul Skeens was unable to get out of the first inning on opening day. So I think it's safe to say he's going to be seeing red, literally, with this game against the Reds. A little businessman special in the afternoon. So the fellas obviously will have you covered. As I'm recording this, they'll have you covered on Tuesday night, but they'll also have you covered later today on a Wednesday here on April Fools. But appreciate everybody tapping in. As always, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, on our way to 23,000 subscribers here at the channel. If you see any clips that go out on YouTube, if you're watching one of these shows premiere on YouTube, help us out. Hit that heart icon, hit that thumbs up icon. It really allows us to get more eyeballs on what we're doing and ultimately bring more content to the table as well. Also of note, really fired up to have our sponsors on board here at this point. 78 Cigars, QC Kinetix, Sharefax Credit Union. Also have the deal running with Homage. Also can get some tickets, by the way, to the Final Four, which we're running out of time for that, as obviously that is coming up on Saturday, thanks to our friends over at Altifiber. All that information will be in the comment section, the description, I should say, of the YouTube video. And if you're listening in podcast form, it'll be in the notes, the episode notes of the podcast there as well. So really appreciate all of our sponsors being on board here, and we're looking to add to that certainly here in the coming weeks. Exciting times here at Chatterbox Sports. But let's dive in to the Cincinnati Bengals. We've been going pretty hard on the Cincinnati Reds, obviously, over the course of the past few days, dating back to last week, certainly as well, with the opening day festivities. And, it's a calm period for the Bengals, right? For the offseason in the NFL certainly comes in waves, right? You have free agency. It gets everybody excited here in a couple of weeks. We'll have the NFL draft in the first round specifically. We'll have a lot of people excited, but kind of in a lull right now as it relates to the Bengals and the National Football League. However, some pretty significant meetings transpiring in Phoenix. They happen every year. There's always that picture that I think is so funny of all the coaches that get together for the shots. The NFL posts that on their social media. Obviously, it kind of explodes all over the internet. Zach was up there top right with Andy Reid. Probably a good person to be rubbing shoulders with. Obviously, there's that rivalry between the Chiefs and the Bengals. Haven't tapped into it fully in the past couple of years. Not a bad idea to be rubbing shoulders a little bit with Andy Reid if you are Zac Taylor there, of course. But some noteworthy things come out. All the coaches speak, so all the teams and the beat reporters have stuff to write about, questions they can ask about kind of how free agency went, potentially any more signings to come, and kind of just the thought process of the team and the organization going into draft time, which obviously is at the end of April. And we're going to roll through some of the things that Zac Taylor said here on this segment, and he had some things to say about the defense, some of which may be surprising a little bit, and I think a lot of it's certainly expected there as well. But kind of our first time that we've really heard from Zac Taylor. We've heard from him with some of the press conferences when they were introducing some of the new signings in free agency. Brian Cook, Boye Mafe, Jonathan Allen. But this was kind of an extended conversation, 40 minutes with members of the media over breakfast, and it was kind of the AFC coaches breakfast where he took questions from media members, and Zac has always been very gracious when it comes to that. So some takeaways as it relates to that here around the corner, but we do have to give a shout out to our friends over at Sharefax Credit Union. The Stone Shield Show is brought to you by Sharefax Credit Union. Sharefax is a not-for-profit financial institution owned by its members that returns earnings to them through lower fees and better rates in addition to traditional banking options. You can apply for membership at www.sharefax.org if you live in one of the 12 counties that Sharefax represents. Just like the rest of Cincinnati, Sharefax is fired up for the baseball season and is ready to experience all the highs and lows together with the Chatterbox community. Sharefax Credit Union, insured by NCUA. Today's show is also a service of QC Kinetix. Really fired up to be partnered with our friends over at QC Kinetix there as well. If knee pain or shoulder pain is slowing down your performance, whether it be on the golf course, the pickleball court, or even in the gym, talk to the care team at QC Kinetix Cincinnati about regenerative medicine options. Learn more at qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. The team over there is absolutely incredible. They have a location in Liberty Township right across Lakota East High School. The folks at QC Kinetix bring a different approach with regenerative medicine, and you don't have to be an athlete. If you're just a weekend warrior here in Cincinnati dealing with back pain or trying to get ready for golf season, they can help. Check out the team at QC Kinetix and see what they're all about. Again, visit qckinetix.com or call 513-655-3356. I think one of the themes from when Zac met with the media was that, hey, we're going to need our linebackers to take that next step. And I made the joke when we first came onto the show about the Bengals signing a linebacker. Obviously, that has not happened. But as time goes on, and again, we don't necessarily need Zac to come out and tell us this. It is very obvious here, based on Cincinnati's approach to the offseason, here as we're sitting here on April 1st. They're going to require a lot out of Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight Jr. Both guys are going to play. Both guys are going to play a great deal. And that obviously can be frustrating as a fan when you kind of sit here and evaluate this team. You feel like they're not that far away in some other aspects of this team. For instance, offensively, the quarterback, check. Skill guys, check. A couple of solid guys on defense, check. I feel solid about the coaching staff. I know others out there don't, but I think for the most part that can be a check as well. So you're not sitting here in a situation like the Miami Dolphins, right? Where it's like, well, we just need these young guys to draft and develop and kind of see where we're at. No. You're in win now mode. It's championship or bust right here or right now, and that's a little bit unorthodox for a team that, of course, is picking in the top 10. I think Kansas City can be coupled in this category as well because they're not trying to, rebuild for the future. Andy Reid, Mahomes, Travis Kelce coming back, Brett Veach, they're trying to hoist the Lombardi Trophy right here, right now. I don't think anybody else in the top 8 can say what we're saying here in Cincinnati when the folks in Kansas City are saying they're in Kansas City as well. So that's why this becomes such a dice roll of a situation for the Cincinnati Bengals, right? If you had holes all over your roster and the goal was just, see if we can't get to the playoffs, right? See if we can't get a little bit better from 6 wins last year, whatever the case was for Cincinnati in the 2025 season. Then you can sit there and say, yeah, let's kind of send the rookies out there at linebacker and see if they can develop and hopefully take a step in the right direction. I think the reason we're all so frustrated is because that is not the identity of this team. That is not where this team is at right here, right now. This team is in a position where you can go win right here, right now, which is why we've all been sitting here banging the table, say, hey, sign this veteran. Hey, go out there and sign a guy in free agency at that linebacker position, whether it be Chenal from Kansas City, Caden Ellis for Atlanta. Ultimately, that didn't happen for Cincinnati. So do I have faith that Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight can get a little bit better here in 26? Yeah, they can get a little bit better, but can they get better to the point where they can elevate the defense or hang in there on the defense and make them a serviceable unit that can go out there and compete, despite the fact that obviously your identity as a football team is on offense? I've got questions as it relates to that. I know every single person out there watching and listening to this has questions of their own as well. So didn't necessarily need Zac to come out and tell us, yeah, we're really relying on Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter to get better. But I think some people will see that quote that was in Paul Dehner's piece and get a little bit increasingly frustrated. But their actions here throughout the offseason to this point have told us that that is what they are banking on here at this point. And ultimately, we'll see if it works out. But, my overarching takeaway is that's fine if you're not in championship win now mode, right? If you feel like, you know what, we've got a lot of good players, but we're probably a year or 2 or 3 away. That's a fine approach. That's not the approach that you have right now with a frustrated Joe Burrow at quarterback. Even remove the frustrated piece, the best quarterback in the NFL, top 3 quarterback in the NFL, the best wide receiver in the NFL, the best wide receiver duo in the NFL, really good running back, offensive line that's played the best they have ever played in Joe Burrow's time here in Cincinnati. So it's just a little bit different for the Bengals, and I think that's why the approach that they have is very, very frustrating. But last time they spoke, they being Duke Tobin and Zac Taylor at the Combine, they told us, like, hey, we're looking for a combo linebacker. And it didn't happen, right? And then Zac kind of pushed that to, well, we had opportunities at other positions, which, of course he's going to say that, and I don't fault him necessarily for saying that. I think Jonathan Allen's a really good signing. It's a signing we should be fired up about. It's a signing that's going to help this defense raise their level of play and potentially be a championship-level defense. But the linebacker play was just so bad last year, and it'd be one thing if it was just, well, you got to go with Barrett Carter or you just got to go with Demetrius Knight. But both of them out there again really makes you wonder what this team's going to look like defensively next year. Also of note, he mentioned Oren Burks, which to me was shocking, to be completely honest with you. We've talked about cut candidates before here on this show. We'll continue to do it as we get closer to camp. It has become pretty evident, I think we can say with 100% certainty, B.J. Hill is not going to get cut. I don't think T.J. Slaton is at 100% safe at this point, but it certainly is trending in that direction. And if you ask me to put money on it right now, I'm saying 100% T.J. Slaton will be on this roster for Cincinnati, which, by the way, with the addition of Jonathan Allen, I got no issues with that. If you're asking me right now, do I want T.J. Slaton to be on the roster? Yes. Why? Because his role is a little bit different this year with Jonathan Allen. But he mentioned Oren Burks, and I'm just like, yo, right? Cody Ford, he can't be back. He's got to get cut, right? And there's a couple other guys that fit that bill as well. But Oren Burks, to me, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to get cut. Again, this is no disrespect to Oren Burks, right? He's a guy that won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia. I'm fully aware of what he brings from a leadership perspective, from a veteran perspective, certainly as well. But the bottom line is he was competing with rookie linebackers that clearly had no clue what they were doing, and he wasn't even able to stand out amongst those guys, right? And was really just a special teamer for you, which that's a whole nother conversation because you really need to value special teams now that you lost your best special team player in Tyson Anderson. But we'll save that conversation for a different show. But just the dialogue around Oren Burks mentioning his name as if he's a guy that could potentially be back for Cincinnati. Again, this isn't a 100% thing just because he mentioned Oren Burks that he's going to be back. But I thought it was a 100% thing that he wasn't going to get back, and clearly it is somewhere in the middle. So that was another big takeaway that I had. And also, going back to the 2 youngsters, Carter and Demetrius Knight, really quick, Zac said when he made the decision to start those guys about the middle of the year to roll with both of them, he was looking at the long-term value of doing that. I believe him when he says that. Did that mean they kind of were giving up on the season to some capacity defensively? I think you can read between the lines a little bit there and maybe get carried away. I don't really have a strong take there. But yeah, getting those guys reps as rookies, you would think, assuming that you drafted guys that are sharp upstairs, made of the right qualities, and Zac spoke to that, saying, hey, if we thought this was going to break them, for them to go in, struggle, game to game, series to series, play to play, we wouldn't have done it. But we think they have the mental capacity to be able to endure that and overcome that. Only Zac and the staff know the players. We have no clue whether that is true or not. But, hopefully we can see them reap the benefits of that. Because if those 2 guys go out there, and again, they don't have to be great. That's the thing. You don't need Brian Urlacher out there in the form of Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter. If they can just go out there and be serviceable, put your corners in a position where they can win. You're better on the back end at safety now. Have success there. Get after the passer a little bit more. Miles Murphy takes another step. Shamar Stewart takes another step. Then you're looking at it, it's like, just go be serviceable, don't miss a ton of tackles, and don't give up the big play. The expectation level is not super high for these guys. And the requirement as far as their play and performance on the field is not super high for this team to be really, really good. The reason we all have doubts is because of how bad it was last year. But, if those guys can go out there and play competent football, we're going to have to look at Zac and be like, you know what? You're right. You took some blows in 25 that ultimately were going to cause you to struggle in 25, but it worked out in the long run for 26. But the problem is, with those two guys, I think he kind of got away with an extra year with Myles Murphy, right? Where it's like year 1, nothing, year 2, nothing, and then, year 3, here he is. Can't have that at linebacker. You can't endure another year here in 26 that you endured in 25. They have to be playable this year. The staff apparently has confidence that it can happen. I guess Duke Tobin does as well, considering he hasn't added to that room. A couple of other notes defensively before we move on here. Mentioned Shamar Stewart. Said the signing of Boye Mafe doesn't do anything negatively to impact Shamar Stewart and his playing time. And I'm on board with that, right? It's the NFL, right? Guys all over all 22 spots get hurt, right? It's just part of the game. And it's very valuable to have depth there. And even if nobody does get hurt, you got guys that are still playing 35, 45 snaps defensively per game that aren't quote-unquote starters. So, I think this signing of Jonathan Allen and Boye Mafe specifically can only help Shamar Stewart. I don't see this as a situation where, this is going to stunt his growth. No, this is adding some guys to the room that you're going to pay a substantial chunk of change that can play defensively, that's going to allow for Shamar Stewart to kind of grow into the guy that you think he can be. Obviously, when you took him where you took him last year, the expectation level was, hey, we need you to come in here and go right here, right now. The Myles Murphy thing was a pleasant surprise in the wake of Trey Hendrickson's injury. Now, all of a sudden, you add Boye Mafe. All eyes are going to be on Boye Mafe, right? Obviously, Shamar Stewart, first-round pick, that's going to garner a lot of attention. But if the Bengals aren't getting to the passer, I think the conversation's more going to be around, we paid this guy Boye Mafe a ton of money in free agency when he didn't really have much production stat-wise from a pressure sack perspective in Seattle, and you just gave him $60+ million. What are we doing? I think that will garner a little bit more of the narrative than, hey, this Shamar Stewart guy can't play, right? So I don't think I totally agree with Zac. This doesn't negatively impact Shamar at all. He's going to have opportunities. Guys are going to get banged up. Don't be surprised if he either plays his way into a starting role for Cincinnati or an injury happens and he is forced into that role. But even if they do have full health, optimum health, which is, probably very unlikely, he still is going to have a role. And I think this takes some off of his plate. It allows him to develop, right? And we could sit here and get frustrated all over again about the pick. I've done that on several shows. Not going to do that on this one. Just take it for what it is here at this point. Clearly he was raw. We all knew this. We all were saying this. But now he can kind of slowly integrate into the mix. Despite Trey Hendrickson leaving, you bring in a guy that you're paying a lot of money in Boye Mafe, that you have a lot of belief in, that based on his interaction with the media, it seems to be a guy that has his head screwed on properly and is a professional and is ready to get to work. But I don't think any of this negatively impacts Shamar Stewart. It just gives him a little bit less attention, which I think for the youngster is a very, very good thing. Lastly, mentioned corner. How often, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, talking about this team, and we came out and said, just sign a veteran at corner. Like, you got some guys in that room that have some talent, but it's a bunch of youngsters all over the place, guys in their low 20s. Like, let's bring in a veteran to help lead that group, even if that veteran isn't a quote-unquote starter that's playing a ton of snaps for you on the defensive side of the football. Now Zac's sitting there going, well, everyone wants to add a veteran. Dax and DJ are now veterans, and he's right, So I think the gripe of, add a veteran to the secondary. You brought in Brian Cook as a starting safety. Maybe you want to add his backup. If you don't get Caleb Downs, make him a veteran. But the bottom line is, looking around the league, it felt like we've been saying that for several years, but Zac's right. That room's not really young anymore. Obviously, you got Fig Newton, but he's no longer a rookie. He's now been here for a couple of years. And then JD, obviously, is a seasoned vet there as well. So I don't think we need to sit here and bang the table and say, add a veteran. I think you're in a spot where it's like, yeah, you probably need another corner. Nobody's really talking about that corner 3 or corner 4. a guy like Delane or McCoy might fall into your lap if all the edge rushers and Caleb Downs are gone and Sonny Styles are gone. But it's just kind of funny how that turns. Because we all were sitting here saying, yeah, we kind of like the room. It needs to be better, but let's just add a veteran to that room. We've been saying it ever since Mike Hilton left. Now all of a sudden you look around, it's like, well, you got some veterans in the room in Dax and DJ. So I thought that was interesting. Will JD get some competition? He needs some. Again, this is an anti-JD. I respect the heck out of what he's done in this league. Practice squad guy, fighting tooth and nail each and every year. How many times is he on this roster, going through a preseason, has that meeting with Zach, or Zach's like, yeah, you're going to be on the outside looking in, you're going to get cut, but we want you on the practice squad. Great practice squad player by all accounts. Had an opportunity at the end of last year, really, really cashed in ever since JD inserted himself into the lineup for Al Golden. That's when that defense kind of, I don't want to say took off, but took a significant step in the right direction. But he's got to have some competition there. By the way, Paul mentioned in his piece, they kind of asked him about Dax potentially moving back to inside. That is going to be a fascinating conversation for Cincinnati. Zach has talked about in the past how it's like, we like Dax on the outside. We've asked him to move around so much. He drafted him as safety. He played nickel, played on the inside. Finally got to a place there on the outside where he was playing really good football. The last thing you want to do is move him. He was non-committal, basically just saying, hey, it's March, and we're sitting here having this conversation. We'll see ultimately where things stand with Dax Hill. But I think it's a reasonable question because what I was just alluding to about the number 10 overall pick, I think there's a real world where it's either Delane or McCoy, and the last thing you want to do if you're the Bengals is take one of those two guys and then go, well, we just have a bunch of outside corners, so Dax and DJ are going to start and JD's going to be the nickel. No disrespect to JD, but if you're picking a corner in the top 10, he better be in your lineup somewhere, whether it be him going to nickel or Dax bumping into nickel. I don't know what it is. Al Golden, Zac Taylor, and the whole staff can figure that out. But the 10th overall pick better be a starter if he's fully healthy. I think that certainly goes without saying. All right, Danny Hurley. Let's have this conversation a little bit. We're about halfway through this show here on April Fools. Danny Hurley going back to the Final Four. Polarizing figure. Make no mistake about him. I know, just kind of talking from some people in the media, watching TV, talking to my buddies, seeing the social media reaction. Feels like you're either way over here or way over here with Danny Hurley. You either despise him, can't stand him, think he's a nut, or you think he's awesome and would love to play for him. If you're asking me to pick a side, I think it's a little bit more on the nutty side, certainly. Which, again, if you just open your eyes and watch the games, it will tell you that. But at the same time, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. Coming over at coach at some smaller jobs, at Rhode Island, ultimately gets the UConn job, which, you look at UConn and you're like, duh, UConn, like perennial power, what are we talking about? But UConn was down for several years. They really were. And Calhoun, obviously, is the legend in the game, did a lot for the university, won championships. And then you kind of had that, I want to say fluke, because like Kevin Ollie, he won the title. And it's incredibly difficult to win the national title, but that kind of, I don't want to say it was a blip in the radar, but it kind of got people off the scent of, hey, this program's not necessarily in the best spot. I think Ollie, the year he won it, was an 8 or a 9 seed. But ultimately, they've gone through a lot of rebuilding since, and Dan Hurley has returned them to being a perennial powerhouse. I think that certainly goes without saying. Again, accomplishments on the court, can't take anything away, and all of his players have come out and it's like, yeah, this guy's a little crazy, and he coaches us really hard, but we love him. And I think that goes a really long way as well. If your players are coming out saying they love you and they love playing for you, that's enough for me, because they're with you every single day. We're just watching you for 40 minutes on TV when ultimately you're going out there and competing. However, there was a clip, I didn't catch it when it happened live, but Braylon Mullins obviously knocks down the shot. There was 0.3 seconds left on the clock when he hit it. That basically is a buzzer beater, right? And you can't advance the ball in that situation if you're Duke. You're pretty much cooked. That's pretty much it. And there was a clip that was going around social media and made its way across ESPN and Fox and all the sports networks of him like going up to a referee and literally going forehead to forehead and basically kind of giving him the stink eye, basically kind of giving him the what now look, like what you gonna do? That's what we just did, basically talking crap as if he were a player going up to an opposing player. And I saw it, and this day and age, I've said this multiple times on the show, when I see something that's, I don't believe necessarily fully right away, I immediately say to myself, I'd say, it's made up. Somebody somehow made this, right? And then soon found out that it was not. It was the real thing. It actually happened. And I'm a little flabbergasted, a little bit shocked. But then I sit there and go, why am I shocked? It's Danny Hurley. And this guy's absolutely nuts, right? Couple of takeaways as it relates to that. He is one lucky son of a gun. Danny Hurley. He is one lucky son of a gun. If you did that to the wrong official, I think the official's last name is Ayers. I'm forgetting his first name, but people have come out and they were like, yeah, this is like one of the best college basketball referees. He's lucky. He's lucky because that deserves a technical foul, right? I mean, point blank, just by the letter of the law, if you get head to head with an official, imagine if a player did that. Imagine if a player walked up to an official, went head to head. I mean, that would be like an ejection, right? And he doesn't even get a technical foul. The game was not over. There was 0.3 seconds on the clock, so he is extremely lucky. It would have been one of the craziest moments in the history of sports had that been, I don't want to say officiated correctly because I don't believe that to be the case, but had that been called, would have been one of the craziest moments in the history of sports, and it would have ruined an all-time moment for Mullins, who hit the deep three for UConn to win the game, because that would have been free throws for Duke, and they probably would have won it because they were down one with 0.3, and if you're shooting free throws, obviously, I think in a perfect world, you make one, it's like, all right, let's just send this thing to overtime. This game's awesome. Let's keep it going for another 5 minutes. But if Duke were to step up to the line and hit both of them, Danny Hurley would be in a world of trouble, and I can't even imagine what would be going through his mind, right, if he just had one of the greatest moments in college basketball history and then just self-sabotaged and immediately ruined it. So that's takeaway number one. Takeaway number two, I respect the heck out of that referee. Respect the heck out of him. Again, technically, what's the right thing to do there? In my opinion, technically, the right thing to do there is tee him up, right? But I respect the heck out of that referee for saying he went a little A-wire, off the wire, a little A-wall there. But there's 0.3 seconds left. His guy just hit a crazy shot. Let me just remove myself from this equation, from this situation, and not make this about me. Make it about the players on the court. So the referee, again, I think his last name is Ayers. Tip my hat to him. That is awesome, because there's a lot of referees out there that would have looked at that and said, are you crazy? Boop. And teed him up right in his face. And been driving home that night just laughing like, what a complete idiot. Who the heck does he think he is getting in my grill? Right? But just so much respect for the ref. Again, I don't know technically. I would assume the right thing to do there would be tee him up. But, sometimes it's like just understand the moment, understand the situation, and, maybe doing what isn't technically the letter of the law is the right thing to do there. And I think the official did, right? Just let it go. Don't get your feelings hurt and remove yourself from the situation. And just back off and go towards the scores table, which is exactly what he did. And then Dan proceeded to go on Urban Meyer's podcast and be like, yeah, I was going to chest bump the ref. You were going to chest bump the ref, right? Well, even if that's true, what in the world are you doing? What do you mean chest bump the ref? This guy has no bias. He's the referee. He is officiating this basketball game, and you thought he was going to chest bump you, right? So one, that's just laughable that he said that. If I was Hurley in that situation, I would have just been like, yeah, I was really intense, and I was just kind of walking around, didn't really know what was going on. I think that's probably the appropriate thing to say. To say, oh, I thought he was going to chest bump me. That is absolutely insane to come out and say that, albeit on a podcast, but a well-respected podcast, obviously with Rob Stone, Urban Meyer, and Mark Ingram. They do a tremendous job. But that whole situation, I was just kind of taken aback, to be completely honest with you, because I respect the heck out of the ref for not doing the tee, giving him the tee. Probably deserved a technical foul, right? I mean, if that happens 8 minutes into the basketball game, that's a tee, 99 out of 100 times, maybe 100 out of 100 times, right? But respect the heck out of the official. Dan Hurley, he's lucky. He's a lucky son of a gun. He coached an unbelievable game. Just some of the sets that he's able to draw up. I mean, he's a mastermind there, but just keeping his team in it when they were really getting dominated, definitely getting dominated throughout the entirety of the first half. And then you look up and it's like, how do they have this thing at 15 points? Like, it feels like they should be down 25. And then just continuing to fight and fight and fight and put them in a position where, Caravan hits the three and all of a sudden you look up and go, oh my God, it is a 1-point game. What an unbelievable comeback. But he's lucky. He is incredibly lucky that thing didn't go sideways, because that would have been the highest of the highs to the lowest of the lows for Dan Hurley if that official would have done, quote unquote, the correct thing by the rule book, the letter of the law. But again, in my opinion, he did the correct thing by just kind of removing himself and heading to the scores table. But again, first thing I thought was like, that's what an edit this was by this, artificial intelligence. Like, whoever came up with that, tip my hat to you. No, it's real. It actually happened. And it's pretty bizarre. Pretty bizarre, ultimately, that they transpired. Sticking on that game a little bit, we talked about Shire, but I was kind of perusing The Athletic and came across this piece. And, I don't want to make stuff up here. They weren't calling for Shire's job. But at the same time, they were attacking John Shire pretty heavily. And I'm not a Duke guy, right? I'm not going to sit here and say I'm some John Shire stan. I'll openly admit that when he was playing at Duke, I thought he was awesome. And I thought it was awesome that he was Coach K's assistant. I thought it was awesome that he was the successor to Coach K. And I think he's done a tremendous job, both from a coaching perspective and certainly a recruiting perspective, and just kind of keeping the Duke brand going. There's no denying that, filling in for Coach K, who's a legend, is very difficult, and he has kind of kept that thing going. And, you could make the argument, is it still ascending? I don't know. I think maybe it is, but that thing is still, that has not wavered at all. And that's replacing a legend. The most difficult thing to do in coaching, replacing a legend. Look at Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. I like Kalen DeBoer a lot. I think he'll have success at Alabama. But when it was up here with Saban, and now it's down here off the screen, right, for Kalen DeBoer. It's just not even, you can say the standard is the standard all you want. No, it ain't, right? The standard's totally different. Now, look at North Carolina. Roy Williams steps aside, and then you think, oh, we're just going to keep this thing trending in the right direction. Hubert Davis, first year, he's going to the national title game. What in the world's going on? Roy Williams' roster, by the way. Now look, he's fired, right? He's no longer the coach. So replacing a legend is the hardest thing, in my opinion, to do in coaching. And I think Shire has done an incredible job of that. Now, you are evaluated based on how you perform in the NCAA tournament, right? If you are a college basketball coach, that is the reality of the situation. And he's got 2 defeats that are going to be impossible to stomach until ultimately they get to a national championship game. But even there, that's probably not true either until they are hanging a banner saying national title champions for Duke University. So you look at this year, right? They only lost 3 games all year, right? They've been at this thing for months, and they've only lost 3 games, all of which they had big leads and blew them, right? Obviously, I mean, if you watch the first 12, 15 minutes of that first half against UConn, it looked like UConn wasn't even playing. They looked like they were playing 2 different sports. Like, it wasn't even close. And then to lose that game, obviously very, very difficult. And then you rewind to last year, which I think is why this narrative is building around John Shire, because you were up 9 with 2 minutes left against Kelvin Sampson in Houston and lost. That obviously was in the Final Four, and you had a guy that went number 1 overall, and Kai Knippel was taking the NBA by storm. Just an unbelievable roster with, Evans was on that team and Gangbo was on that team, albeit in a very limited role, but the team was absolutely loaded, and you had a 9-point lead with 2 minutes left, 2 minutes away from competing for a national title, and you blew that lead. And then the previous year, in 2024, you lost to that NC State team, which I don't think Duke that year, Duke in 24 and Duke in 25, like, those teams were not even close. Those rosters, again, it's Duke, they were good, but, the teams that he's had the past 2 years were significantly better, and NC State was on one of the biggest heaters of all time, where they just went through that conference tournament, won it, and were winning games left and right. In the NCAA tournament, I was like, what in the world is going on with NC State? But I don't necessarily attack him too much for that loss either. So I believe that was 4 years for Shire. Obviously, has been to the tournament, has won games in the tournament each and every year, and you're evaluated for how you perform in the tournaments. And when you have big leads late and you lose back-to-back years, especially when you get that far, it'd be one thing if it's like, yeah, they lost in the round of 32 and it was a close game the whole way and they just didn't get the final bucket at the end, and ultimately the other team did. And you're probably not having as big of a conversation nationally. I think Duke is probably sitting there like, do we have the right guy in Shire? But the reason it gets so much national attention is it's Duke. They have an incredible year. They're the 1 seed. They only lose 2 games in the regular season and look to be well on their way to just smacking around a team that's won 2 of the past 3 national titles. All of a sudden you look up and you blew another massive lead late. So, again, I don't think this narrative would be building had last year not taking place, right, and the loss against Houston in the Final Four, up 9 with 2 minutes left. I just think it's the culmination of those things that kind of have led to this. But it is so difficult to hang banners and win national titles. It's like winning majors in golf, right? There's so many golfers out there that win all these tournaments. Look at Xander Schauffele for the longest time. It's like, yeah, this guy's clearly one of the best players in the world. For a while there, just didn't have the major title to show for it, right? And that kind of held him at a different standard relative to some of his peers that had that major title. And then Xander has the year where he wins 2 of them, and now it's like, if somebody's going to beat Scotty and Rory when they're at their best, it's Xander Schauffele. Now it's kind of the narrative around him. So very, very difficult to hoist trophies, hang banners, win national championships. Borderline impossible as well. And I mentioned when we first came onto the show, how many guys, Roy Williams, it took him forever to win a national championship. Cal had to go to multiple different places in order for him to ultimately win a national title, right? Coach K, again, I think it was his 11th year as the head man of Duke before ultimately he won the national title. So these things don't happen overnight. Jon Scheyer clearly is a superstar in the making. He's been at the helm for a couple of years, and he's still a couple of years away from turning 40 years of age. So I don't think there's any negativity from a Duke perspective. Again, I'm not a Duke guy. I'm not a Duke alum. I don't know that. Maybe they have the lunatic fringe that Ohio State has. Honestly, I don't know. But just this narrative nationally that, Jon Scheyer, he just blows leads. He had a 2-loss season, right? And obviously he's got a lot of freshmen on the court, which is how he recruits. And now Duke will probably continue to recruit despite the fact we're in the NIL era now. But I think if you're a team that can get the best freshmen in the class, you still do it. And I think Duke's going to continue to do that. I don't know what their recruiting class looks like exactly for next year. I would imagine they have some really top recruits coming in that are going to be starters for them in 2027. But I think the question becomes from Scheyer, something we talked about earlier in the week. Could he potentially make the jump to the NBA? There are people in the back channels, Rumorville, blogs, websites, whatever, that think that is a possibility. I think it would be very difficult for him to do that after how the past couple of seasons have ended. Again, he's not even 40, right? If he wants to coach, like these guys, look at Patino, he's in his 70s, right? He doesn't need to do this right here, right now. If Duke had won the national title this year, I think there is a real world that he would leave. But based on some of the heartbreak over the past few years, based on the fact that it's his alma mater, right? He won one as a player. I'm sure he wants nothing more from a professional career perspective than to win one as a coach as well. I would be shocked if he left now after that loss, but ultimately we'll see. But Jon Scheyer, there's a lot of really great college basketball coaches in this day and age. But if you're asking me to pick one, honestly, right now, to have for the next 10 years, right, if I'm any of these universities, regardless of size or blue blood or not, I think it's Jon Scheyer, right? So I love Coach Cal. Coach Cal's almost 70 years old. Patino's incredible. He's in his 70s. Izzo's incredible. He's in his 70s, right? The fact that Jon Scheyer's had all this winning as a head coach and is replacing a legend, again, incredibly difficult. I don't think a lot of people understand that. I think they say, well, it's Duke. It's going to recruit itself. All the top players still want to come to Duke. It's Cameron Indoor. Look at how things have changed in Tuscaloosa, right? When Nick Saban was there, it was like, yeah, why wouldn't you want to go to Alabama? And Kalen DeBoer can still recruit, but it's 2 different programs. It's 2 different teams when you evaluate them. When I look at Duke, it's still Coach K, and it's still trending in that direction. So we'll see. I don't get the narrative around Jon Scheyer. I get it. You're judged for how you play in the tourney. And he's had some heartbreaking defeats and has blown some big time leads. But this guy's simply one of the best in the game. All right. A couple of more things that we are going to hit on before we get out of here on today's show. However, do need to give a shout out to our friends over at 78 Cigars. Cincinnati legend Anthony Munoz has a new venture. We're fired up to partner with it here at the Stone Shield Show, introducing 78 Cigars, a premium cigar line from the Hall of Famer himself. If you love cigars, if you love great cigars in Cincinnati football history, this is the perfect combination. You can grab 78 Cigars right now at both Montgomery Inn locations and over at Creekside Cigar Co. Or you can check them out online. Just head to anthonymunoz.com and click on the 78 Cigars page to learn more in orders today. That's 78 Cigars, from the greatest offensive lineman to ever do it, Anthony Munoz. All right, a couple other things I want to talk about. Tiger. How much time we got here? We got about 15 minutes or so left here on the show. Quick check on the Redlegs. 6-3. I got group chats and Twitter exploding right now, so I'm sure some crazy stuff is transpiring. But the Reds are down to their final 3 outs. They're going to need 3 in the 9th to keep playing, or obviously 4 to walk it off, assuming they're able to get out of the top of the 9th without giving up any runs. So we'll keep you updated here before we sign off. But obviously, when you're watching or listening to this, you will know the result of that ball game, and it will be time for Abbott and Skeens, most likely the rubber match here on a Wednesday. Tiger Woods. We've talked about him throughout the week. You know, it's crazy, when something happens with Tiger. And it just kind of goes to show you how famous of a figure he is, right? You talk about golf. I think golf's in a great spot. Now, a couple of years ago when Liv was kind of coming on the up and up, it's like, oh, golf is in a very difficult spot. I think they've got some good leadership. I think Rolap coming over from the NFL, he's going to get this thing rolling in the right direction. And Liv is crumbling. I think within 5+ years, it will cease to exist, to be honest. And Greg Norman and all those guys are going to look pretty silly. I think ultimately they already look pretty silly. I think the next domino to fall is whenever DeChambeau comes back, right? And once Bryson comes back, it's over, right, for Liv. It is absolutely over. Koepka obviously has already come back. But Tiger, again, like you got, obviously ESPN, Fox, all the sports outlets are talking about it, but like you turn on national news and they're talking about it. It's like Michael Jordan. Like that's the type of figure he is. And it will never go away, right? Obviously he has been out of his prime now for a long time. He's 50 years old. But he will be one of those guys that, as long as he is here on the earth living, when something happens around him, it is going to make headlines all over the place. Tiger, of course, was arrested, DUI, not alcohol, painkillers. Some more details have come out a little bit, and he has issued a statement. There was a dialogue. If you go back to TGL, which was last week? Is that right? Like, it was only a few days ago, obviously a couple of days before ultimately his arrest, where, he had played in the TGL final, and, that was his first competitive action, right? Which, people laugh at that, roll their eyes at that, but I do think there's something to be said, considering the stakes at that event, too. We'll see how long TGL lasts. It's one of those things where it's like, if it's on and there's no good basketball on, I'll flip it on and see what's going on. I watched the championship round because Tiger was playing, right? But there became some dialogue on the heels of that event, like, hey, this guy might be at Augusta here, which is obviously coming up. The Masters, that obviously now is not going to be happening. Released a statement, basically said, understands the seriousness of the situation, is going to address it, is going to step away, is going to get some help. And pretty obvious, I think, that this was going to happen. What he needs to do, like imagine if he came out to Augusta, right? If this happened and Tiger Woods showed up at Augusta, it would just be a thunderstorm for the media. They would be all over that. Nobody, I think Rory would probably be, and don't take this the wrong way because Rory and Tiger do have a relationship, but Rory would probably be in a great spot because, all the pressure this week is on Rory, right? Now, let me explain that a little bit. All the attention, I guess, is on Rory just because of what he did last year. I shouldn't say pressure because the pressure is off Rory here at this point, but all the attention would be on Rory. It's like, oh, how do you feel now? You got this monkey off your back. Now you can go out here and play free. Could you potentially win back-to-back? If Tiger would have showed up to Augusta, it would have been all Tiger Woods, 100% Tiger Woods. And it's kind of like that regardless. Like if this incident didn't happen and he just showed up, but the fact that he had just gotten arrested a couple of weeks before the event, it would have been a complete mess, right? And it would have just been media attention out the wazoo, right? So pretty obvious he's not going to show up to Augusta. No Champions Dinner. He's going to step aside, get out of the public eye for as long as he can. And when him and his people and his team and his lawyers and all the people that help him make decisions think it's been long enough and think it's not going to be, it's going to be a whirlwind whenever he steps back out publicly, but they'll probably sit on this thing for a little bit and try to let everything die down and, have some other things pop off in golf, right, before he ultimately steps back out again. So I think stepping away, obviously he's stepping away from competitive golf for a little bit, but also he's stepping away from the limelight a little bit. He's stepping away from the cameras. You're not going to catch him at any of these. You're not going to catch him at the Champions Dinner. You're not going to catch him at any of these meetings. Obviously, had a pretty significant leadership role on tour as well. That is going to, they're going to put a hold to that, certainly. But, I grew up as a kid. I think anytime as a kid you're watching a guy have that much success, like, you're kind of drawn to it. And you're like, man, this is awesome. Like, he's winning these tournaments left and right. This has been a reoccurring theme, and there's been some people, obviously the Barstool guys are getting dragged through the mud, and rightfully so, that are like, oh yeah, like, we're going to protect Tiger at all costs. Like, for what? Like, he did this to himself, right? He's got to get his act together. He's got to figure this out. He's got to hire a driver, for the love of God, right? So, I didn't think any of this was surprising as far as, him stepping away. There are some reports that came out there were painkillers in his pocket. Again, if you have followed Tiger throughout his career, when you got the news, you weren't thinking alcohol. You saw DUI, but you're like, this guy's not drinking. It's not the alcohol. It's not beer. It's not liquor. It's the painkillers. And, this is something that athletes have to deal with, especially athletes that have had a bunch of surgeries. I mean, some of this medication is prescribed to you. How do you get off it, obviously, is the question. I saw Jim Gray come out and say this was kind of a cry for help for Tiger. And again, I don't know Tiger, right? So I don't know his team. I don't know his family. I don't know any of these people. I kind of push back on that a little bit. I don't think necessarily it was a cry for help for Tiger. I think he's just like, this is kind of how he lives his life on these painkillers, but he still wants to go about his normal life, right? And his normal life obviously involves him driving a car. Which obviously that needs to stop, right? Because I think in this situation, it's fortunate that, one, he didn't hurt himself, but he didn't hurt anybody else, right? Think about all the innocent people just on the roads on a daily basis. They don't deserve this. They don't deserve, and by they, I mean us, right? The general public doesn't deserve a guy going out there impaired, driving around middle of the day on a Friday, right? Or at any time, obviously. So the stuff is fascinating. No surprise that he's stepping away. Painkillers in the pocket. I look at that picture of him in the bushes on the phone, and it's just hard to imagine it's real. Talking about the AI stuff with Dan Hurley, like, that was kind of like, is this real? Like, Tiger Woods is standing next to a car that's on its side, and he's in the bushes in Florida, like, on his phone, repping Sunday Red. Like, what in the world is going on? But a pretty safe bet to say he was on the phone with his lawyers. Like, what do I do, right? Like, I am not 100% sober here at this point. My car is sideways on the road. Everybody's okay, but the cops are coming, and I don't know what to do. Again, I don't know that to be a fact, but I would assume he's on with his lawyers there at that point. Apparently, he came out and said that he was looking at his phone and changing the radio station. Maybe that's true too, but you weren't sober, right? You were on the painkillers, right? We know this, we understand this. So, I think personally he's fortunate that he didn't get tested in 21 when he had the wreck, where it was just like, oh my God, this is an awful wreck, but we didn't, see if he was sober or impaired or whatever afterwards. Got lucky in the sense that he didn't have to deal with that then, but at the same time, it's like, well, maybe if he would have had to deal with that and he was caught for being under the influence, then this event wouldn't have happened years later. Again, that's a lot of speculation there, but I guess we'll continue to wait and see, and it'll be fascinating. The next time he steps in front of a microphone and talks, what he will have to say. I'm sure he will have in-depth conversations with lawyers. I'm sure, I mean, he's gone through a ton of media training throughout his career, but I'm sure he'll sit down and have a few more sessions before the next time he gets in front of a microphone. And I would expect it not to be any time in the near future. I think they're going to sit on this thing for a while and try to let this thing simmer down before eventually he makes some actual comments, made a public statement, but he wasn't answering questions in front of a microphone. So we'll see. Tiger Woods, they're going to talk about it at Augusta, but as far as him being there, being the story of Augusta, not going to be happening. The focus will be on Rory McIlroy trying to repeat, on Scotty Scheffler to see if he can come back into form after just having another child, which I think is fascinating. By the way, we'll talk about that. We might have to dedicate a full show next week to the Masters. I get pretty geeked about the Masters. I think it's one of the best events of the year in sports, period, regardless of the sport. So fired up for the Masters. And, Scotty, everyone's like, oh, what's going on with Scotty? All these, he's coming in like 20th place. And it's like usually when Scotty has a bad week, he's like 6th. Well, he's dealing with having another baby. And I personally have not had a baby, but I had a good buddy that just had a baby, right? And it alters your life, right? Even if you are the dad and you're not in the position where you're literally having the baby, your life looks different at home, and waking up and all the different things that you're faced with and have to overcome and that are dealing with. And when you're doing all those things and trying to be the number one golfer in the world, I'm sure that can be very difficult. So we'll see if Scotty can bounce back. I think that's going to be a fascinating storyline next week at Augusta, but Tiger obviously will not be there. Looks like the Pirates tacked on a couple of more runs in the top of the ninth. Now the margin is 5. I think that was Pierce Johnson perhaps on the bump for Cincinnati. So they need a big-time ninth inning to win back-to-back series. For now, it looks like it will be a rubber match with Pittsburgh. Businessman special 12:40 later today. A couple minutes here real quickly on LeBron. We'll go into this in depth later on when we make time for this segment. Lakers, by the way, 3rd place in the West. And, a couple of weeks ago I came on here and basically was like, man, the Lakers are cooked. They're done. They can't win the championship. I'm not backing off that take. I still believe that, but they also deserve some respect, right? Because they're in that tier with the Nuggets and the T-Wolves in the West as far as that second tier. I didn't quite know if they were in that tier. We know they're not up there with OKC and San Antonio, but I kind of thought they were in that 3rd tier. You can't put them there right now. And, maybe if they play Denver in a 7-game series, it goes sideways quickly on them. Same thing with Minnesota. But J.J. Redick's done a tremendous job. I'm talking about John Shire being an elite coach, elite young coach. J.J. Redick is a really, really good elite young coach as well. And, I think LeBron gets so much disrespect. I'm not a huge LeBron guy. I think Jordan's the GOAT. I think there's no debating that. But I think that the shots that people take at LeBron, it's like, this and that about LeBron, and he's making it so much more difficult for LA to win. I think a lot of that's rubbish. But at the same time, I think it will be a little bit easier for Redick to coach when LeBron ultimately is not on the team. We'll see. Whenever that is, whether that be next year or beyond. But I saw ESPN put something out about LeBron's landing spots in 27. My gut says he'll be back. Again, people act like it's like, oh, this guy stinks. Well, he's 40 plus years of age. Like, what do you expect him to be the guy that was in Miami with D Wade and Bosh just throwing it down on guys left and right? Right? From a dunk perspective, no. He's 40 plus years of age. I feel like he will come back for another year. Again, maybe I'm wrong. And I think there's only a couple of teams that make sense. I do think a reunion with LA is potentially in the cards. Pelinka has come out, their GM said that he would like LeBron to retire in Los Angeles. New ownership group coming in, though. It's those Dodgers guys, and they know what they're doing, right? As the buses are kind of getting phased out here in Los Angeles, and they might be sitting here going, this is Luka's team right here, right now, and we're fully in on building around Luka. I think there's a lot of variables at play. One, how much does LeBron want to play for, right? Because if he's like, well, I just want to play, right? I don't really care about the contract. I think there's a lot of different possibilities. But if he wants to make a ton of money with the Lakers, don't know if that's necessarily something they would do. Look, everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants to make as much money as possible. But if there was one guy, in my mind, it's like if I'm LeBron, I don't know if I'm necessarily thinking about money for the final year of my NBA career. If I'm LeBron. But newsflash, that's not how LeBron's thinking, right? So If the Lakers come in and lowball him, he's out. He's not going to take some discount to stay in Los Angeles. He has got a number that he believes he is worth. Rich Paul and all those guys had that same number in mind. And if the Lakers go below that number, he's going to be like, are you kidding me? Right? Again, this is what my gut says. And I think there's really only a couple of other teams at play. If he is not a Los Angeles Laker and he does decide to keep playing basketball, the most obvious fit is Golden State with Steph Curry and Draymond Green. Look, they're holding on to dear life here. By the way, Steph is supposed to come back on Sunday. He got some work. I don't know if it was 5-on-5s or if he just returned to practice yesterday, but did some work, and he's in a situation where he's got, if he plays on Sunday, then it's only 5 regular season games. Like, we're getting close here to play-in time. The Warriors have clinched a spot in the play-in. They can't be eliminated from that, but I think they're also like 3.5 games out of the eighth place, which would be the first part of the play-in where it's like they could lose that game, and then they play ultimately in the second play-in game. But I think it's kind of a one-and-done situation for the Warriors, where they got to win 2 games in order to get in. Is probably what it looks like. But again, they're holding on for dear life here. I think they're doing the right thing, holding on to Steph. This isn't the best way to construct a team for the future, but when you have an all-time player like Steph Curry, who literally you could argue is on the Mount Rushmore of basketball players, again, we can have that conversation a different day, I would be going about it the same way. Whereas, from a team-building perspective, you would say, you might need to move off Steph Curry, and by Steph Curry, I mean also Draymond Green as well, kind of just restart. But I think they're making the right call not doing that. They're kind of out of options, though. Like, LeBron's a guy that can make sense, like, to bring in. I think the league would be like, oh, my God, yes, sign us up, right? And they put them on prime time as often as they could, and those numbers would be incredible. LeBron and Steph on the same team, and Draymond. Would it, and Jimmy Butler, too, coming back, assuming he's going to be back in Golden State. Would it equate to winning a championship or a deep playoff run? Probably not, but it would be incredibly entertaining. I think that's a spot that makes some sense. Obviously, you have the Olympic tie-in with Steph, and Coach Kerr certainly there as well. Cleveland, of course, is an option, but I think the reason why LeBron came to LA is he wanted to hide a little bit. I mean, ever since he was a kid in high school at St. Vincent St. Mary, he has been just cameras on him wherever he has gone. I think in LA there's so much superstars, so many celebrities, it allows him to hide a little bit, which is why he went to LA. If he goes back to Cleveland, that's all coming back, right? Everybody's on him at all times, right? The kid from Akron, he's coming home, and just the media would go crazy with that, and the attention would be second to none. I'm not quite sure LeBron wants to go back to that. However, if he's looking for a spot to win a championship, I think there's an argument to be made that Cleveland could be that final spot for him. 2 other teams quickly. The Knicks, he's always talked about MSG in a very... he calls it his favorite place to play. He absolutely loves MSG and the history behind that arena. Think that could potentially be a fit, but also that's moving your family, which his kids are older now, and his wife, and they've all been in LA for a while, all the way across the country for a year. Is that something you want to do? I think LeBron also likes the weather and the golf out in LA as well, but that's a roster that could be viewed as one veteran player away from making a run. And lastly, it would be the team that is currently in town in Los Angeles, and that is the Clippers. But wouldn't have to move, obviously. I think the Clippers could pay him more money. When we first got on this topic, I do think that means a lot still to LeBron, as crazy as that is to say. But the Kawhi future is uncertain. And then beyond him, Darius Garland I like a lot, and I know LeBron likes him a lot. But Darius Garland, LeBron, and Kawhi, that's going to be your team to win a championship or go after a championship, and there's no guarantee Kawhi will be back. Don't really have a ton of options there in LA besides those guys. However, Ty Lue is their head coach, obviously. Won a championship with LeBron in Cleveland, and those two reportedly remain close friends. So it'll be fascinating to watch that LeBron situation transpire throughout the summer. But in his mind, he's thinking go on a run here and try to win a title. And I kind of dismissed that as a possibility, but they're in the spot right now as a 3 seed. They're going to get some favorable matchups. We'll see ultimately if they get on a crash course with San Antonio or OKC, if they can hang in there in that type of series. I don't think so, but they've kind of, outperformed certainly my expectations for them this year, as they're in a pretty good spot near the top of the West right now. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Oh my goodness. 2 outs in the 9th. Bases are loaded. Newsflash, Sal Stewart's back on base. Eugenio Suarez is up. Unfortunately, if he runs into a baseball right here, it still is a one-run margin. So we are going to sign off here. If it was 7-3, I might stick around and just kind of look at this live as we're recording. But still work to do for the Cincinnati Redlegs. Ultimately, they're going to pull off this come from behind victory, down 5 with 2 outs in the ninth. But they'll be in action later today on April Fool's Day. And yeah, Suarez struck out. That'll do it. Reds lose 8-3. 1-1 with Pittsburgh, and series with Boston was 1-1. Obviously, before the rubber match, Cincinnati got the best out of that game. We will see here in about an hour or so if they can go toe-to-toe with an angry Paul Skeens, who's going to be seeing red, literally, in that matchup. But appreciate everyone, as always, for being here. Appreciate everybody that tunes in live as this is premiering on YouTube, and certainly everybody that listens in podcast form there as well. Appreciate everyone, and until tomorrow, take care, everybody.